Thank you for hosting us today, team. It's always fun to come back home. Okay, not quite at home, but pretty close. So thank you for having us. Thank you for hosting us, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to come and join us. Everybody, you're all very busy people and you've all got lots of things to do, but you choose to take the time to come down and be part of this. These are like talking sticks, and they're not a microphone. It's so if somebody's at home watching this or watching the recording of this, that they can actually hear us. So it is like a talking stick, so you'll get it passed around. So there are some people that may not have been at the last version of this. So what we've done is we've moved away from the formal agenda concept of a committee meeting to just coming and having a conversation, sharing some information, and then actually wanting to hear from you guys. So it just enables a little bit more flexibility. We still have an agenda. We still have points that we have to come back and highlight and take responsibility for actions that need to take place. But it just drops the formality out so that if there are things that you want to talk about, that we're not required by standing orders to only stick to the agenda. So it just gives us a little bit more flexibility, which is why we thought that these were a better idea for our community versus what we did have. So today we've got some members of staff that are going to give us a little bit of a information update, and then we're basically going to just have a conversation around whatever you guys would like to have a conversation about. Is everyone sort of okay with that as a direction of travel? Awesome. So I don't know who wants to kick off. Who wants to be leader of the pack? You good to go? Perfect. So I will hand over my talking stick. It's an interesting book.
This is really weird.
Oh, hang on. Can I just... Yeah, I've still got a talking stick. Sorry, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Kylie Leonard, and I'm the elected representative for the East Rural Taupō ward. So that encompasses here, out to Wairake Village, through Tūrangi Road, out to Māroa, then shoot straight across Māroa to Poihipi Road, come down Poihipi Road, transverse through there, go out the back of Waitahanui through Bonshore Park, and then head out to the Tarawera Tavern on the Napier Taupō Highway, and then cut across the high road and come back and drop down into here. So that's what my ward, or our ward, encompasses, just to give you an idea of the size. So probably the largest land holding as far as the ward goes. Rachel Shepherd is elected in the Taupo at large and has come out to join us today. First time to River Road, so it's nice to have her here. And
Rachel Cameron.
Oh!
I got married.
You can tell I've got a head cold developing, so the brain has stopped functioning, it's left the building. And we have apologies from Deputy Mayor Kevin Taylor and the Mayor John Funnell, and also Wahine Murch was hoping to be with us tonight and she can't be. So just to give you some perspective on Wahine, that's Evelyn Forrest, who was on the committee, her niece, so she's now a councillor in the Māori ward seats. And I'll just hand over to, do you want to say anything else, Rach?
Oh, I've got a question just before you go on, if that's all right. Please.
Go on, Graham.
There was mention a meeting or two ago about the council maybe having an intention to drop the East Taupō Rural seat.
Yep.
And to me that meant they might also be looking at dropping the Mangakino-Pouakani and maybe even Turangi. Have you heard any more about those intentions?
We're actually doing a review of representation at the moment. So there's no decision made yet, Graham, but it is being discussed. So if you guys have any views, if you want to share those, look, we can have a conversation tonight, or if you want to send in emails so that you've got a written record of those things, then that's up to you guys.
I reckon, just my own opinion, that we need that representation. You know, we're spread out. We're one of the biggest districts in New Zealand in terms of area. So we've got these little communities like out here at Mangakino-Pouakani, Turangi, Takanu, Kuratau, Pukawa. they need representation. And if that representation was withdrawn in a review of whatever, then it's going to be much more difficult for council to hear our views and for us to get our views across. So I think it's a retrograde move. I also think, and I've mentioned this to Rachel earlier today, that our councillors are all part-timers. They all have other jobs, and there's a huge amount of work to run the council efficiently. So I don't believe there should be a drop in the number of councillors because of the district area and because of the spread out geographic situation and the amount of work. And my own opinion is that councillors should be paid a lot more so that they can justify actually putting a bit more time into the job, because now I think a lot of councillors are putting in extra time and not getting properly rewarded for it. So that's my thoughts on that. I don't know whether anyone else got anything to say about that. Volunteers?
Don't mind moving around with the talking stick. There you go. You want? I'll sit down with it. Oh.
I've been missing in action. So, is this working?
No, it doesn't. It's for the people at home. It's not
Oh.
a projection.
Oh.
Yes, it's just because this is being live streamed.
Okay, thank you. In that case, what I want to talk a little bit about, or hear from you actually, is about this amalgamation. And you may have already talked about it, but I think just summarising what it really means and what the impact is, to bounce off Graham's point. Does it mean less representation? That's a yes or a no. I don't need a story. Okay. And if you're paid not enough, to take Graham's point again, then how does that impact us as the residents? I mean, what's the lack of services that we will see?
I'll tell you what, I've got a comment to make on that.
Have you?
Yeah.
Would you like the stick?
I looked at the councillors, all right? And average stipend for a councillor here, and there's 12, is about $40,000, right? $48,000 max. The actual staff bill that we are paying as ratepayers to the Taupō District Council is $34 million. $34 million per annum. So the little 48 or 50,000 we're paying to our councillors is infinitesimal compared to the amount of work and responsibility they have. So even if you double the stipend, it's still an infinitesimal amount compared to what the staff are costing us, $34 million a year. Okay?
That's a good point. I would just argue that pensioners probably don't get much more than that.
Yes.
And that's a full-time position, right? And that's a full-time position. I'm sort of half joking, but not really. There's a degree of seriousness to that. So there is an opportunity for council to leverage the senior community and to take advantage of some of the available time and engagement. And maybe they'd give up some of their own salaries to do that if they don't have time to serve us. What I'd like... Oh, you go.
No, you go for it, Kylie. Sorry.
No, sorry, what I was going to suggest... What I was going to...
Take that.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Look, the governance of the Taupō District Council probably isn't full-time, to be fair. We do rely very heavily on the specialists in their field, which are staff. You know, they present the papers to us, they weigh up the pros and cons, they give us the argument. We are there to question and to push back if need be, but we do rely on their recommendations as a starting point anyway. So the staff are actually really very important. But you want your elected official, I'd imagine, to have a bit of professional background or some knowledge in the area of anything to do with governance, quite frankly. It's a big job. Governance is quite specialist, actually. And we all have our own backgrounds, and the whole point of elected members is that we are representative of the community. So a senior can absolutely run, and they would be there to represent the senior population. So if you think there's a gap in your representation, tap some people on the shoulder for the next election, assuming we have a council. And if you see somebody with the skills that you would like to see around the table, tap them on the shoulder and ask them if they would run, because none of us are running for the money. It's not about money for us. It's genuinely about doing the right things for the community. And I'd just like to think that my background is helpful and that I've got a perspective to offer. I don't.
Out of the loop, but what is your background?
I still do have a job. I manage and develop commercial property in Taupo and Hawke's Bay. There's a property in Auckland I look after as well. So building, construction, regulatory compliance, that sort of thing. So as an end user, I recognise that actually that's a pretty tough space when you're dealing with council. So I think council staff and council as an organisation needs to hear from the community about the end user experience. So we all have our areas of expertise, and that's mine.
You don't want a whole lot of old coots in the council running it though, because they're retired and they've got nothing else to do. You need people who are up with the play. Yeah. And that means to me, you know, a younger generation than old buggers like me, you know. So, you need bright people who've got a lot of energy.
Yeah, I think possibly the best parallel is the director of a company, okay? Exactly. Where I see John Funnell as the chairman of the board, you're the directors, we're the shareholders, you've got a CEO and a CIO and a COO and all the rest of it. It's quite easy to benchmark a director's fees because essentially the job is the same. You're managing a company, and whether it's a listed company or a privately listed company, it's the same. So you can benchmark what a councillor earns or in fees with what a director earns in fees. Sorry, I've got a follow-on question, maybe later on with that same structure, but I think that that's the best way to compare it. But obviously, and I take your point, and it's very much appreciated, that a lot of people are on council, and even some in central government are there to serve, not to be there on the 30th of every month.
Quite right. And it's interesting to understand how the remuneration is divvied out. It's based on population, and it's paid for by the remuneration authority, so it's not ratepayers paying our salary or the mayor's salary. It's your tax money, essentially, that's paying it. So it's based on population, and we don't have a huge population in Taupo, but we've got a lot of rateable units. So if you think about how many houses are not occupied full-time because they're a secondary home, for instance. So it's a bit skewed. It's actually a little bit skewed. We're not too far off the size of Rotorua, really, but their councillors probably get paid double our base rate. So, yeah, there's certainly a case for that, for perhaps getting more professional directorship type people in there. But I think there's a real community aspect there too. I think you've got to get the balance right.
While we're just on that subject, can I make a question, and it's possibly good that there's not a wider audience here. No, but I'll speak to it because it's come up recently about the filtration of information that councillors require to perform their governance roles, yeah? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand there's been some instances where councillors have requested of the CEO information that will assist them in their analysis of operational budgets and the like. I mean, there's a lot of stuff under the big headings. But it seems to me that, from what I understand, that information has not always been forthcoming. Now, correct me, is that the case from what I read?
In my personal experience, no. Every single time I've asked for further information, I receive it.
But I understand one or two councillors have had some problems in getting specific information. Is that true, or is that
We have a lot of information, and we have a requirement to read the information. There are some councillors that would like to circumvent that and to just have the pieces that they want to know handed to them in a one-pager. So they don't want to read the 450 pages that are given to them. All of that information that they ask for is sitting within those papers. Reading the papers gives you the information that they request. So then you find that there are legoimas, which is they're written by some councillors to get that information that way. Those legoimas, you can imagine with the legal team and all of those things, how much that is costing. But I know the information that is in those legoimas because I've read the papers.
No,
Also something come up just recently. There's an MP named Stu Smith.
yes, indeed.
And Stu Smith has put a private members bill into Parliament, which had its first reading yesterday or the day before. And it's a change to the local government governance. And it guarantees that if a councillor asks for specific information, they no longer have to go to the LGIME. They can ask it directly and be given that information. So that's going to become law. That's the latest I've heard. Stu Smith.
Yeah, I understood that to be more specialist advice. Like if we wanted to take something to a lawyer and have a legal opinion on it, under the Local Government Act, we can't take that information out and have it viewed by a lawyer, say. I believe the members' bill that you're referring to is giving councillors, mayors and councillors, the ability to do that if they so wish. But as Kylie said, a lot of all of the information is there. Our job at a council meeting is to ask questions to satisfy ourselves, to then discuss and debate and then vote. All of the information is there. It's really incumbent upon us to ensure that we understand it, and if we don't, ask those questions. That's just another step in, the right direction if we wanted to get some specialist advice. We can't just get consultants in and ask them to present to us. Yeah.
What I understood from the little bit I've read from this Stu Smith fellow is that it's just questions that might come up in council meeting. What about this or what about that? Can you explain it? And the staff are obliged to give that information. That's it, plain and simple. That's as I understand it.
That's correct.
It's only the first reading, but I think it's a good step.
Yeah. I think anything that's going to help elected members make a good decision has got to be a step in the right direction. Yeah.
Surely AI has a role to play in that.
You've got to be very careful. Very, very careful with AI because it'll tell you what you've asked it to tell you.
We need
Yeah.
human intelligence before we need artificial intelligence. And
You
there's
mean
not a lot of
authentic
human-
intelligence?
Sorry?
You mean authentic intelligence, the
Correct.
other form of
But
AI?
AI bases it on human intelligence, but the trouble is there's no barrier as to which end of the intelligence scale it's getting it on.
You know,
With AI, if you don't use appropriate prompts, you put rubbish in, you get rubbish out, and that's the danger with it, is that people...
right? But I think that's something your IT department should be looking at. Is that a whole of government thing? Probably. They're definitely using it, right? They're using it in Wellington, so why would you guys not have that?
Oh, we do. It is used, but you just have to be, well, report generating, probably. Getting all the information together for this amalgamation discussion. For example, pardon?
Telling you what you want to hear.
No, not in that context, because they still have to put their name to that, and I know that they don't want anything that's going to misinform us to get onto a council agenda. I'm sure they're very careful about it. But it is really good, for instance, with the amalgamation process. We had to gather a lot of information. It's all publicly available information, but dragging that information, putting it into AI and getting a spreadsheet out of it that we can read and use, AI is great for that, yes. And it is being used, and we're always looking at ways that we can use AI to reduce the burden on staff and therefore operating expenses. So there is a part there for AI for sure.
So what you described before in terms of councillors wanting a summary of the pieces that are relevant to them is what we would call a bluff statement, bottom line up front. And so I think that's just a change in policy and process and adding that component to your reporting. Just something to think about.
And we have to be cautious around what goes out into AI as far as what then becomes discovery. Yeah.
Just one comment, and that final document, I think it was the agenda for the meeting, there was 100 and something page document about the amalgamation with all the options in that. I didn't read it all,
No?
skim read it, but honestly, that was very, very well produced. I thought that was amazing. I mean, the amount of
Research.
facts and stuff in there, if you had have had to produce that manually, it would have been literally thousands of person hours to do it.
Absolutely, and we were so lucky actually, you know, coming back to your point about staff, good staff, I mean, anyone in business understands that their greatest asset is their staff. Because when you've got good staff, it makes your job that much easier. And in this instance, we had some incredible internal resources, financial and in terms of policy. And so we were able to do it all in-house. I'm aware of other councils who have not only had to bring in consultants, but they've also had to borrow money to pay consultants. So to your point, yes, good staff are worth their weight in gold, and retaining them will actually save you money in the long run. It really will. Any business owner who employs will tell you that.
We've got to pause, so I'm going to hand over to the staff because they have worked hard on their presentations, and I'd love to carry the conversation on when they've had an opportunity, because I'm sure that there will be questions raised. Do you just want to let them know whether you want to take questions during or at the end?
I mean, yeah, I'll give a brief blurb and introduce myself, and then if you have questions, we can go from there. So good afternoon. My name's Heidi, and I'm a policy advisor at Taupō District Council. I focus on reserve planning and environmental management, and currently we are getting all our reserve management plans that we have in the district, and our reserve management plans sort of tell us what our values are of the reserves, what objectives we have, the outcomes we want. And we've got about 13 to 14 currently, so not all our reserves are covered by them. So I know the ones on River Road currently aren't covered by a reserve management plan, and a lot of our reserve management plans, basically all of them, are very, very outdated, and the Reserves Act requires us to keep them under continuous review at least every 10 years, and I think the oldest one I found was 1993. So yeah, they haven't been reviewed in a wee while. And so we've decided, like many other councils are doing, to review them all together and put them under one main document, if that makes sense, just so everything's in one place. And so by doing so, we've actually decided to categorise all our reserves. And so we've got different categories. So you've got, like, the instance of this reserve here would be a neighbourhood reserve. And then you've got your reserve down by the river, and we'd call that a recreation and ecological linkage reserve, because it's your main access to the river and it's where you go to walk and etc. We also have civic reserves, like our Tongariro domain. We have our nature reserves, so they're more like scenic and less used for recreation, more used for inhabiting bird life, etc. And then we also have our sports grounds. And so by categorising them, we're able to target specific objectives, outcomes and values for each of those categories. So obviously, like I said before, River Road has not got a reserve management plan. So the two reserves that are here will be looped into those two categories I said before. And so currently we have not drafted anything. We are just coming out to the public for 2 months to ask what you like about the reserve, what you don't like, how do you use it, if you've seen other reserve management plans, because they're really fun to read. What do you like from them that you might like carried over to something that you've got here? I personally used to live on this road, so I know how great it is having that walkway back there and the access. You've got your main linkage one. This is just for council reserves.
Two more reserves that are maintained, I think, aren't they, by council? The one that's behind, that one down there is, and what about the one up here?
Just one down here is maintained by council, none.
And who does that one?
Nobody.
That might be, sorry, that might, yes, it is all one parcel, and even the access from the road, those parcels, that's all the riverside one. Oh yeah, I do have a map, it's quite small. And so it is, I think if I can tell from what you're talking about, it is all,
They're separate, they're not joined.
Okay, are they road reserve then? Are they? Do you think they're maybe road reserves? Whereabouts are they? Are they down? So road reserve is more. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, but it isn't actually joined. You can't walk there.
Yeah, no, but so it doesn't. Sorry, it doesn't matter if it doesn't link because the land parcel is still all the same. Yeah, yeah. Yes, yeah. So that would still be under that definition of the category. Yeah, so we have 2 months where we're just coming out to the communities, having a chat, what you like, what you don't. And so you can make submissions. I've got some forms on the table behind you guys to go over what feedback you might have. Otherwise, we do have everything online as well, and we have the map online that you can access and actually have a detailed look into it. But yeah, I know from living here, there were definitely pros and cons of the reserve. And so I'm sort of just here for questions and queries. Yes, I wish I could. I'd make submissions on many. And
Does the playground get included in what you
yes, yes.
So obviously that's been a topic in our own little
Okay.
meetings on
Yeah.
a regular basis now for a year or so. A year or two, yeah. Because it's never been touched in how many years, Addie?
32.
32 years, right? So,
I think it has. It did get a little upgrade
oh,
once.
did it? Okay. And that would be more than 10 years ago? 20?
What would you say the aspiration is for that upgrade?
Well, we'd like to make it attractive. I mean, we get a lot of, you talked about the temporary housing, we get a lot of holiday makers here in the summertime. You know, what are the kids going to do? If they're not doing that, they're probably blowing up letterboxes. I mean, you know, seriously? So, you know, we really would like to see that as an attractive component. And I think it also makes the people who do use their homes as businesses, it's another draw card for them. Same with the reserve. I mean, have you walked down there recently?
I came fishing probably a month ago.
Okay. How's your ankles?
Yeah, I mean, I did lose a gumboot once.
So it's a little rough, right? Yes, so it's very rural, and a lot of people comment on that. Not helped by some of our locals who like to rip it up a little occasionally.
Yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts on once you get to the boat ramp, you can drive mainly by 4-wheel drive down to the actual river. Is that something, because a few years ago, before my time, we put natural barriers in place, a big boulder, and it was removed. Is there something more permanent you'd like there, structure-wise, to stop people going down there?
Look, I don't know whether this is...
Yeah, of course, yes, of course.
I mean, whoever goes down there goes in a big 4-wheel drive, and they're just carving up.
And they just rip it up. Yeah. I mean, we've had them come. So we're the boathouse. We're the house on the ramp. And so we've had them come in and rip up the bit of reserve that we front onto as well. We've broken down the fence and they've come in, and you're like, okay, great. So yeah, I just ward them off. But the reality is some I would imagine you'd use something like you have in front of cigarette shop.
Yeah, it's a tricky one with crime prevention. Yeah, it is tricky with crime prevention because when we're working in the natural environment, we do want things to not really stick out. Like, that's why we try and, yeah, for sure, we do try and do those natural ways, but since it's proved to be inefficient in the past, that's where we take this feedback. And Councillor Cameron here is actually the chair of the regulatory committee, and that is who is overseeing this review. And so when you give us your feedback, we'll point down the main themes, and if something that you're really unhappy about is that access trail, then we present it to our committee and we say, the feedback said they're not happy with the access trail. Can we look at implementing a plan into our long-term plan to get budget to put in barriers and bollards down there? And it's a decision.
A couple of criminal actions down there as well.
Okay.
And they've all been reported.
I was going to say the best thing you can do is report to the police, because the more actual data we have, we can then use it to influence change.
How it works out here, right? Most people take the law into their own hands because by the time the police get here, it's all over.
We have.
Oh,
the
somehow I'm
committee-
not supposed
the
to phrase it that
committee-
way. Sorry.
The committee has filed 105 reports, and we know that it's not going to, but it goes in the database.
It does, it's very
And-
important, yeah.
To be honest, people.
What's the alternative?
Sorry. Well, people out. Well, as you well know, people are pretty resourceful,
Self-managing.
and often a barrier becomes, where there's a will, there's always a won't. Yeah, so you're going to need probably a 30-ton boulder, and that will present a challenge, and it will disappear one night. So,
Can I just ask, what is the attraction for driving down there?
So it's a group of
There's-
them, and they tend to go
there's
down
there's
there
a
and
swimming hole at the end because the river goes along, and it goes out, and there's a bit of a sort of an eddy. So there's a calm pumice lined swimming hole there.
Familiar with the place, but I don't understand when there's car parking available by the boat ramp.
Yeah, but it's like everything here in New Zealand. If your car is not 5 metres away, it's a drama.
They also rough ride through there, okay, and they've been stuck. We've had them 3 o'clock in the morning, still trying to get out. The good news is we're well
River
insulated.
Rodians or out of River Rodians?
I wouldn't know because I don't actually go down there to look. So
But
we
I
turn all the lights on,
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
house lights up, and they all go shit. And you hear
I
lots of
think
swearing.
the problem probably needs to be attacked a little bit more psychologically. It's no use putting up more and more barriers. That's not going to work.
No, but you can put barriers up that they can't remove.
Yeah, but that's what Donald says about the Mexican-US border.
Exactly, that'll work.
Oh, they'll find a way over
We have to
under
provide
it,
them with a
round it,
ladder anyway,
whatever.
so the locals can
So
have a look at
it's no use spending $3 million on putting something there. Let's think about a solution rather than trying to. And why do they go there? And what is the problem? That yes, they are creating a problem because the river floods there. It fills it all up with water.
mud, silt.
I think we need to think a little bit.
So it's a culture change we need to look at there then, isn't it? We can change.
We need to limit access. That said, there are locals here who do use that and like to drive in there, who have been maintaining it and doing what councils should be doing.
There's a trade-off to everything, isn't there? There's a trade-off for everything. But fundamentally, this is the sort of information that we do want to hear, how you want to use your reserves, how you don't want your reserves to be used is just as important. So
Children down there, if you've got a bunch of older kids and semi-adults, or maybe they are adults, I'm sort of lose track.
So can I just ask that you put that in a submission, a formal submission, along with any suggestions that you'd like us to consider as well? That's what's going to help us. And we've got this opportunity now to be able to, the community has the input to decide how they'd like to see their reserves used.
And I'm assuming this is also a forum for feedback as well, correct?
It is, but the process is better if we have those formal written submissions. It really is, and it goes to the police. The police reports as well. So our bylaws are prioritised and generally in what's the word I'm looking for? The police quite often help us with that and say, this is where your problem is. You've got problems over here. So continual reporting to the police every time it happens is actually a good thing, because then they'll come to us and say, hey, we've got to do something. And we do actually need the entire community, including the police, to help us out with this. We aren't going to be able to solve this problem on our own.
Yeah, but that's a behavioural change. We're too far out by the time police got here. If they're going to report, you're just wasting their time. A lot of people feel...
No, it's a paper trail that we need.
You might need the paper trail, then we need to put a caveat in there to say we've solved it ourselves, but here's the report, which is what those 105s.
Which is the 105 reporting, absolutely.
It's reported. And there's a paper trail of the consistency of the problem. It's really important, actually.
And just also around submissions, please don't ever do one as a group because they get considered as one submission. So Turangi did it once. 256 people contributed to one submission, expecting it to have the weight of 256, but it was considered as one submission, and that we don't get a choice around that. That they are the rules of local government through the Local Government Act.
So it needs to go to the minister as a complaint. It's a process change, right? I mean, if 250 people contribute to one report and it's a brilliant report, it saves so much time, so much of your time. You're not reading 249 other submissions. To me, anyway, it makes sense.
It's a situation.
Election coming.
Yeah, so feedback like this is amazing for us. So in terms of the process, this is for the entire district, like I say, so you don't even have to comment just on your reserves here. There's plenty of them out there. And then at the end of September, the consultation period will close, and then me and my team will go away and start writing up, and based on your feedback, we'll present it to our committee, and they will make some decisions of what they want to see based on the themes, and then we will draft together our reserve management plan. And then all going well, I think over the December, January, February period, we come back out to you guys and we show you what we've written, and then you give us feedback on that as well, and you say, oh, actually that's really great, or no, I think it should be worded this way, etc. And then you have the option to speak to our committee for a hearing, and then we go through hearing and deliberations, and that's where Rachel gets to do all the fun work, and then it will be adopted potentially, all going well, mid next year.
Okay, so is there any reason why we can't, for example, using the Turangi example, where 250 people contributed to one report, is there any reason why you couldn't print off another 249 of the same report and sign them by different people? Is that correct? That's perfectly legitimate.
It's perfectly legitimate, but I would just warn you that once we've read it a few times and it's the same thing over and over, what would you do?
You would not have to read all the others.
Well, we would, because it might be different, you know. And actually the personalised approach, I can tell you right now, hits home. It really does. I want to hear from you. I do.
You're hearing from me now.
Great. But, you know, we have a process to follow as governed by the Local Government Act, and it's there for a reason. It's so that we're accountable and transparent with what it is that we're doing. And those submissions do get read. They do. But when I'm reading the same one over and over again, it doesn't have the same impact. It doesn't. I know myself, if I'm going to submit on something, it's from me, and I will make my points very, very clear. And I'm just suggesting that is probably the best way to approach it.
Yeah, just a question. The Hugh Fletcher Reserve that was taken away from the people, does the council have any input on that one?
It might have been before my time. Whereabouts?
The one that was now got dairy farms blocking it off, access off. It
Where's
was
this, sorry, just to
the one down the river.
I've got a bit of history of that because I was involved with it for years.
Yeah, that was donated to the people of Taupo
Well,
by Hugh Fletcher, wasn't it?
This is where the other boat ramp was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That reserve extended over 2 kilometres, and it was initiated by Mike Andrews when he was General Manager of Fletcher Forest, as it was then. Later on became Tasman Forestry. And a chap named Hayward Aldworth did all the maintenance and development of it, virtually alone. Great old chap. And there was a memorial rock just outside the Warraki Pastoral Headquarters, which is dedicated to him, but it used to be down in the reserve. And there's actually rock walls in there, which are all smoky from when the local Maoris used to capture hundreds of flappers, like flightless ducks, if you like, off Lake Rotakawa, and come down that river and smoke those birds, you know. So there's a bit of historical value there as well. And Fletcher spent over $1 million on that, and it was extensively used by the public. Now, when the forest was due to be sold, right, to the contractors, which is Warraki Estate, they're not the actual owners, they saw fit to block that off, and their excuse was there was too much vandalism, there was cars being pushed over the bank into the river and so on. And I went to the police, and I said, I'll go down there with some others with video cameras and we'll record these clowns, because I caught a few of them and kicked them out, but the police wouldn't let me do it. And as a result, and there's a concrete boat ramp there, a beautiful boat ramp. There were 2 access ways in. There was a loop road going right through it and out the other way. And it was a fantastic amenity for the community and for Taupo, and well used. But it's been lost. So what you're talking about is the reinstatement of that, but it's private property. Yeah. I know the old cadastral maps in the days of Fletcher Forest when I was there, and I'm going back to the 1970s, they actually owned to the centre of the river. So if you were going to try and reinstate that reserve, you would have to get permission from those guys to open it up as private property to the public, and I think that'd be a problem.
No.
So can I just clarify that, please? Because you mentioned it was a reserve. So has it gone into private hands or like?
Whoever owns that land, they'll own that reserve as well.
It's
Or what's
private.
left.
So it's always private, but they allowed the public to use it.
It was owned, 100% by Fletcher's originally. So I don't see that the status of that's going to change because these guys locked us out.
Do you want me to check on that, Graham? Because the new CE of Pāmu is actually a Repara local, so he'll know exactly that piece of dirt.
He's asked the question, and it would be interesting to know, but I think you'll find that it's part of their Wairaki estate.
Well, I'll commit to following that up with Mark and ask him whether there's somebody in his team that could have a little look. I know exactly where you're talking about physically and take it from there and see what we can come back with. So Tanya's kindly writing that down as an action point for me to do, and I'll get on to that next week. Sure.
So, this is a reserve where we are now, right? So, my understanding is that a couple of years ago, the council were looking at removing this hall, right? If the central government amalgamation went ahead, does that mean we lose control over these amenities? Is there a risk, for example, if somebody that's not connected with our area or our council wanted a bit of this, that we could lose these types of assets and maybe even the land?
Honestly, potentially, yes. Yes. Local representation is the big unknown quantity. We don't know how much representation we're going to have at this big table, and we might get voted down. You know, we might get voted down. So yes, that is a risk, and that's also why, in my opinion, our timing to do this is so appropriate, because if all our reserve management plans are up to date, they've got no reason to look at them, and they're going to have a whole lot of bigger fish to fry anyway. So if we can get everything cemented now, while we do have the ability to do that, then we've got a much better chance if, and I almost want to say when, it just depends really on the government here, but if and when amalgamation happens, we've got some up-to-date reserve management plans, and that's one less thing that council has to pay for. So opportunities knocking. Yeah. Submit.
You know, representation from councillors is as good as the constituents make it. So if we don't see you, like we only see you today, then you're not getting that representation anyway, unless there is these kind of meetings. So, you know, that's how.
The purpose of moving to this kind of forum was exactly that reason. Yeah, absolutely. And it is to get the councillors into some of these smaller areas. I'm a Taupo ward councillor, so a lot of my time is spent there because there's, 25,000 people who have 7 councillors to talk to. So it's really important that we get out to these smaller areas in the region, and that is exactly why these Councillor Connect forums have been such a success in my view, because it just gives us that ability to do that.
We appreciate it. I don't see that changing with amalgamation. I'm possibly on the other team. I actually think that the economies of scale, it comes back to what you were talking about earlier, which is the degree of management and the skills. And if it's run like a really tight ship, then you're going to get representation because that's part of the package.
With you on that at all. If we went with the Western Waikato model, yeah, absolutely. If we went with the Western Waikato model, we get exactly 1.9 councillors at a table of, I think it was 15. How do we get a majority decision to go our way? Even at local board level. You've got a very strong representative right here, by the way, and she's one of 12 plus the mayor. That's a lot better for a smaller community like this with a smaller population base than what you'll get under an amalgamation. You'll be forgotten completely. And it's not through lack of trying by your representative, I can assure you of that. And we can. That's the beauty of it. We can disagree.
But this is what happened in Auckland. I mean, we used to, 40 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, remember we had, like we were talking about it the other day, the Mount Albert Borough Council, they had their own traffic policeman and traffic car. There was a One Tree Hill Borough Council, Manurewa Borough Council, Papakura, all these things, and then they amalgamated into Manukau, and I was born and grew up in South Auckland, and they've just disappeared now. And I think now they call them, I think there's just committee members on an award or something like that, and they've just disappeared. They've just disappeared. And it all centres now on Mr. Brown in the big white palace in the centre of town.
That's exactly what Christine Rankin described today. She was part of it. She said it hasn't done anything for Auckland. It hasn't achieved what it set out to achieve, and we're following a broken model. Absolutely. And that makes no sense. But this is not us going to central government and saying we would like to do this. This is central government saying to us, you will do this. I just wonder whether there's a bit of a point at the moment around just giving a high-level summary of the amalgamation, because I just don't know. Oh, sorry, can I just check, is there anything else around the reserve stuff that anybody, was there any other? And please do, because if an amalgamation does occur, the data from those submissions will go to the other entity, and then they will have the reasons why the decisions were made through the summary of the submissions received. So they will become critically important to ensure that that voice carries on through.
I'd just like to touch on the process piece where you said the Auckland amalgamation hasn't worked and gave examples. I think it's an opportunity to do a better process. So it may not be the objective that's broken, more about how it's deployed. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
And that's not our choice.
Yeah, I think there was a bit of discussion today about form over function, and that's the problem when you just go straight into amalgamation like this. I think we've got to fix the systemic problems. There's a funding problem in this country. New Zealand Inc. is quite a large country with very few, taxpayers and ratepayers. So it's the model that's broken. It's the Local Government Act that's broken. It's systemically broken. If we don't fix that first, no amount of amalgamation is going to achieve even the economies of scale that you're talking about. I'm not convinced at all that we'll see economies of scale. Have we seen economies of scale amalgamating our waters entities? No, we've got increased costs. So we've got to fix the systemic problems first and get that function right before we look at the form. And I think that's the big problem here, is that the government's just not looking at how local government functions before they change the form of it.
They have to win the election first.
Well, that's exactly right. So as we're talking about submissions, one of the things I said in the meeting today is that if you don't like this process, or if you do, there's a general election coming up. You need to make sure that every MP and want to be MP knows exactly how you feel about representation at a local government level, because they will be listening, because they want the votes. So I'd say we've got a pretty good opportunity right now.
And I think just to make clear, this conversation around amalgamation started under Labor as well. So it's not a single party decision. There was support previously.
I did a bit of homework on that, Kylie, a few weeks ago, and it actually started in 2002 in the DIA, and they employed 4 consultants, a group of 4. I don't know what it cost the DIA, and these 4 wrote multiple pages of conjecture, for want of a better word. And at the very end of it, they made no conclusion. They couldn't say this was better than the other. There was nothing to encourage amalgamation. There was nothing to discourage it. And it's been sitting there ever since until Bishop and Co picked it up again. So that's what I know about the history.
So there were some councils, just a bit of background, there were some councils having discussions around amalgamation because it made sense for them in their place and space. Central government took it upon themselves to actually put it out to every council, so every council's been forced to do this. So there were some councils quite a way through the process of conversations around amalgamating, and I think that makes sense. If that's where your community was going and that's what you saw fit and that's what you thought made sense, fantastic. For those where it doesn't make sense, it's being forced upon. Regardless, this is the situation that we set ourselves in. So under the Head Start program, we had a choice to either go with a Head Start proposal, which meant we put together who we believed that we could work with, having had conversations, and put forward a proposal. So we've been told that the number was approximately 100,000 people to make a proposal move forward. We tried to have conversations, so this is all under a really tight time frame. We went forth and had some conversations with neighbours and the ways that we thought the community would want things to happen, from getting some feedback, where we as a group of councillors, from hearing feedback, saw some natural synergies, i.e. South Waikato, Aotearoa, Waitomo, similar sized councils where you haven't got too big a population base that would become overpowering, all of those bits and pieces that we considered. So South Waikato came back with a no, not interested. That was off the table. Aotearoa and Waitomo just want to go it alone, the two of them amalgamating, that's their view, so that was off the table. As part of the Head Start program, you could have a conversation with a neighbour and come up with a Head Start proposal, but the other part was the compulsion. So if a council wanted to, even if you said no, you could be compelled by them. So that's where we're sitting at the moment, is we've got Waipa and Waikato who are compelling us to go with them. So they've included us in their plan. No. So the impact is that in my view, we've looked after our assets, we've looked after our debt levels, we've got funds, we have lands, we have all of those things, we have debt headroom. If we need to, we can borrow money. We choose not to. Those councils don't have the debt headroom, they don't have the assets, so we become very, very attractive. So Rachel and I will probably tag team a little bit through this because we're both very passionate about it. Yeah. So one example is we have the East Rural lands that were part of the swap with Contact Energy when the Eastern Arterial route went in. So we have done a development that was completed this year that's created an income of $5 million to the council. That went off debt. If we continued with something like along that line of that process, within 20 years our council would be debt-free. So for other councils who have no debt headroom, they have no assets, we're a pretty good looking situation in a dating situation, and it has been speed dating. It's just been absolute madness, the pace of these conversations, and without good and proper fit information. I mean, it's been really flying blind. So what we've come to is we've said we don't want to put a head start in, we actually want to put a backstop in, which is an option. However, we're reframing that and we've asked for more time. Could we please have another 8 weeks to explore? This is probably our preferred option. It's going to depend on what you say as DIA to the likes of Waitomo and Aotearoa. Our best pick is it's probably going to be a no. It's not going to be the level of amalgamation that they're looking for. So if they get a no, then that gives us another chance to have a conversation.
Yeah. And well, we had a central North Island model that No amalgamation on paper is going to serve our district particularly well, financially or non-financially. We could actually stand alone, but we do understand that reform's needed, and there are councils that are struggling. So it's a trade-off, and it's about, almost for us anyway, picking the least bad option of all bad options, which is the least bad option for us. And we looked at the modelling for a Central North Island model, which included Ruapehu, ourselves, Waitomo and Otorohanga. South Waikato could probably come along with that as well. We could have entertained that idea. They're pretty close. But fundamentally, we actually didn't have a Head Start option because the government set some criteria about those and how they needed to be presented and what we needed to be able to demonstrate, like the efficiencies, the economies of scale. Nothing that we found proved that we could do that. Nothing. Not by any metric did we find that our amalgamation options were going to put our district in a better position. We also had to demonstrate localism. Well, clearly we can't do that. That we could keep up with all of the other reforms that the government are putting on us as well. We can't. We could not proceed with this work and keep up with the reforms and keep up with business as usual. We didn't have amalgamation partners that were willing to work with us either. So we simply didn't have a Head Start proposal because we're not ready. And backstop wasn't really something we wanted to go into. We still want to be able to have a say in determining our future. And we want our communities to have a say because we have not had the ability to go out and fully consult on this at all. And actually, we'd be in breach of the Local Government Act as it stands currently to go ahead and do that. So whilst we've got policy direction from central government, we don't have legislation to act on either. And I think with an election coming up, all this work that we've done, and it's been considerable, will amount to exactly nothing.
That's very sad. So why not take the Taupō model, which has been as efficient and capable and profitable as you've indicated, and replicate that across the other countries?
It's not that.
I was going to say, can we get the question again? Is that okay? Please,
I'll try
thank you.
and phrase it in the same way. Why can't we take the profitable model that you've established at Taupo, that you've just spoken to, and replicate it across the other councils? Why wouldn't DIA or central government consider that?
I don't think we're doing anything differently per se. It's just that we're also quite fortunate. We don't have the same challenges as some of the coastal councils that have all this, the Gabrielle and things like that. They've had to fork out quite a lot of money. You've also got geographically large areas and very few ratepayers. Ruapehu is a perfect example of that. So their asset quality possibly isn't quite right. So that's it. Or the opposite is true. They've invested heavily in their assets and their debt level is high. So you can't really compare one council to another because it's not apples with apples. We mentioned the East Urban lands that we've got and the ability to use that land. We've created affordable housing, which we've sold at market and made a profit. We got $5 million paid down debt. Not all councils have that land holding to be able to do that. We've also got the TEL fund, and that alongside our financial position is why we've got a AAA rating with Standard & Poor's and why we get cheaper lending. Not all councils have those bonuses, I will say.
The last time we talked about this, we talked about the chocolate model. Some years ago, Cadbury got into problems in Dunedin and they had to shut down their chocolate factory. Yeah? Meanwhile, the most respected brand in New Zealand is Whittaker's, of any brand there is. Now, can you imagine the government going in and saying, Whittaker's will merge with Cadbury? What would the consumers do? They wouldn't buy any chocolate because it'd be rubbish. So,
You don't
solving
know
an...
us very well, Simon.
Sorry?
You don't know us very well.
What?
We'd find a way to eat chocolate.
Oh, no. But I mean, this is. I'm afraid this is how the central government is approaching the problem. Oh, Cadbury's got a problem. We'll just tell them to merge with Whittaker's. The public would say, no, we're not going to buy that.
See, I see it differently.
So each brand or each area has its own flavour. It has its own ways of doing things. let them get on with it. And if people don't like where they're living or it becomes too expensive, move.
And that's why we're imploring you to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this is their decision, this is not ours. Just to Rachel's point around rates and population, I was in Invercargill and I was fascinated to hear per ratepayer, they cover the costs of 1.4 kilometres of roading. If you live in Wellington, you cover the costs of 100 metres. So that's, you know, that population numbers within communities. So there's lots and lots and lots of different things to weigh up around population bases, but my personal view is I'd rather see us with aligned councils than misaligned councils. I feel my personal view is if we end up with Hamilton, any of those big councils, we lose our voice, we lose our local voice. We already find that with WRC and our roading, you know, through the Waikato, we just don't. We have one person at that table and we just don't get the follow through. We don't. Well, it's not a me one, but yeah, I do believe that Mike tries, but it's not an easy gig.
And to your point about, you know, finding efficiencies in the economies of scale, well, we've never really seen economies of scale work all that well. Auckland's a good example of that. But there are ways that we can find efficiencies, and the government's not looked at it at all. Our waters entity has remained in-house, but we have a service and procurement agreement with the waters entity so that we can get the benefits of bulk purchase or, you know, those sorts of things. You can have shared infrastructure. There's loads of ways that we could actually find efficiencies that don't remove our local voice. So we're just asking for that ability to look into that at least. And if they're going to force the amalgamation, let us lead it. We, the people, let us lead it, because we are the specialists in our area and we're the specialists in our field when it comes to local government too, because I can tell you now, my personal opinion is that central government and the ministers down there can't possibly understand local government function or complexity if they think this is going to work. So they're not the people for the job. They're just not. This job.
Whether I say it, no, I'm going to say it anyway. I have heard it said to be by a minister that it's great, we can make these decisions in Wellington and then you guys have to go out and front it and you're the bad guys. And it's like, wow, that's...
welcome to the corporate world.
But, you know, they're so far removed that they don't care. They make a decision, give it to local government, and then...
But the difference in a company is you can't do that in a company because you've got to attend to the consumers. And if they don't buy your product, the problem is councils are a monopoly. We have no choice on who we pay our rates to. It's one.
That is an option, of course.
Well, moving, but
No.
sorry. No, just now you've made me lose my train of thought. No, but in general, I think that we should stay as one, but we need to find economies of scale within what we've got. But also, and one of the problems of having debt headroom is that in general, the temptation there is to keep going up. And I think the per household debt that the council has at the moment is over $13,000 per household. It's 200 and the total borrowings, no, but the total borrowings of the council are 280 million. Yeah, but the total debt of the council is 287 million, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, divide that by the number of households, which is about 22,000 approximately.
No, in the district? No, it's more like 47,000. Rating units is different again, as I say.
So you're still looking at about $7,000 per rating unit in terms of council debt. Yeah? 287 million divided by 40 whatever.
That,
272 million.
yeah,
Well, 272 million divided
that
by
figure
40.
is correct, but it's not. It's also it's a little bit nuanced than that because we still do have liquidity funds that offsets that as well.
Yeah,
And that-
sure,
yeah.
but those are current
That's the
assets rather
net
than
debt.
long-term borrowing.
Net debt versus gross debt. Yeah.
He's just trying to give you a perspective which is around the ratepayer, right? I mean,
Sorry.
the point I tried to fight Simon for the speaking stick was the fact that I can't go to a different council and say, I'd really like you to take my money and look after me and look after my community. We don't have that option. Why not? I mean, it's never been done that way. We're still following the old British system in that respect. It's never been done that way. But to me, there's no reason why it can't be. If a council's more efficient over on a coastline, not saying they would be, but if they were, why can't you have the choice? And with it comes competition.
I'm not sure you'll get the outcomes that you want from that, but that's the whole point of voting. I mean, that's why you vote for your elected members too. That is your voice to us. I don't want to put your rates up. I don't want to put my rates up. I'm trying to work this as efficiently as I possibly can. Residential values went down. Residential values went down, actually. Yeah. Yeah, it was the Tranium before they went up. Well, it's just the market. I mean, it's an independent valuer that does a desktop valuation of properties. And so they look at the trends, they drive around some streets, and then they apply values to properties. That's how they work that out. Yeah.
Bottom line is that rates went up
Yep.
by a huge factor because of the additional valuations that took place. Whether it was 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, that's your area of expertise. I can see you're now going to try and...
Well, no, I'm just trying to...
It was significant for a lot of people.
It was, and understanding that it's almost like a pro rata billing system. The value of your house doesn't put your rates up. It just gives you a bigger portion of the rates on a pro rata basis. So the average increase after the annual plan was 6.6%. The UAGC, the Universal Annual General Charge, also went up. And if you look at commercial properties, the values there, their valuations went up quite significantly. So their slice of the pie got quite a bit bigger. So it's not the value of your house that increases rates. It's the slice of the pie that is allocated as a result of the value of your home.
But when you take the value of the home and you multiply it by a percentage, that gives you a rate.
No.
What we've been...
The talking stick's just on the table.
Oh, sorry. What we've been doing every year from the River Road Community Collective thing takes about an hour and a half, but we add up all the rates in the street, okay? And I think last year it was 249,000, almost $250,000 from the 84 properties in the street, okay? My rates went up 13.6% in the previous year, but in the current year, they've gone at 6.06%, okay? But yes, the universal charge has gone up to $425 from $250. The rubbish thing's gone up and all the rest of it. So 6%'s manageable. But I think in the end, it comes down to central government to design a new way, and whether that means giving the GST back on rates to...
Take it. Just don't take the GST on the rates tax. It's a tax on
Exactly.
tax.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, something like that would be, I don't know what that figure would be, but it would be a lot.
But also we provide services to government properties such as police stations.
For free.
Yeah.
Schools.
They don't pay rates.
Yep.
I don't know where you get your 6.6% rate increases.
Well, I know that. I've done...
Ours is 13.1.
Yeah, well, my properties are rural, so there's a slight difference.
Big
But,
difference, double.
but what we've got to do, I've got to get around to it, because we've done it for the last 3 years, is we've gone through the site and we've got a list on a spreadsheet, and we just take everyone's rates and add them up. And then we can give the rates from Boardland Road intersection to the cul-de-sac, and then we'll give out and that's actually a mix of rural and residential properties. But the total rates contribution from River Road last year was $249,800 and something dollars. We'll see what it
was
is.
the level of spend, Simon, for the street
Spend?
from council? What was the level of spend?
I couldn't even give you that
No, we don't know.
That would be a really good detail to follow up on, though, right?
Everything?
Yeah. You go, because I'm going to...
I mean, when you consider what your rates are paying for, it's not just River Road, obviously. We've got a landfill, and although you don't get rubbish collection, that's a user pays model in town anyway. So we still have to pay to maintain the landfill, and the increase on that was actually government levies. So you're right, there's a lot of government imposition. One of the big cost drivers for council in this annual plan was the water regulations. So about half of the average 6.6% increase was going directly to meeting the government's requirements for waters. So if we'd done what some other councils had done and taken the waters figure out, our rates increase was 3-point-something%. We've spent the last few trienniums trying very, very hard to get rid of the nice-to-haves because core functions are so important right now. We've got to keep our assets up to scratch. That's really important. And we've found alternative income streams like the East Urban Land Block. We've invested the TEL fund because we know a rates cap is coming, although the government's gone very quiet about that, probably because they haven't quite worked out how it's going to work with inflation running at 4.1%. But however, that's another discussion. So, you know, to your point, sorry, I've forgotten your name over here, Alison, you know, you vote for us because you want us to ensure that the council is working as efficiently as it possibly can. And then if you're not happy with how we've done that job, when we go for our jobs again and we reapply, you don't have to vote for us. So it wouldn't be any easier going to a coastal council or another council anywhere because it's the same model. The only difference is you've got access to us here. You've got 13 elected members, including the mayor. I walk the same streets. I'm not out here as much. No, I'm not. I'm a Taupō ward councillor. I live in the Taupō ward. I work in the Taupō ward. But that's why we have representation, and that's why we have Councillor Connect forums. So the idea is that we are accountable to you. And if you want to understand our decision making, please do call me, email me, and I'll explain exactly why I voted a certain way and why, because you need to know, and that's absolutely fine.
Whether I should or shouldn't say it, I'm going to say it. Just in water alone, the rest of the Taupō District actually subsidises River Road, just in the cost of the waters and the new standards that we have to meet. So, genuinely...
There is a cost centre then for the River Road water system?
It can be broken out.
Yeah, because that would be interesting because we've heard this, but we might actually request the information then because we've heard this, but we don't. We might actually request that from the community collective, the numbers. And if it needs to be an official Logoima request, fine, so be it. But fair enough, but we want to see the numbers on that.
A fair chunk of that finally coming from the government regulations to upgrade the chlorination system up the creek here. Isn't there a big bill for that somewhere?
There's
No?
a massive bill for that, and that's just one part of the new regulations. So the new regulations, it's quite extreme. And then it's also the risk. Yeah. There's also the risk of if you don't meet the standards, say if River Road was managing it yourselves, then the fine, if there's anything wrong with the water, is up to $3 million if you supply somebody else, or $600,000 if you just supply yourself and somebody gets sick. So those are the new impacts that are out there, and that's part of the risk that's sitting there.
But it's only the chlorination thing, there's no protozoan barrier going in or anything like that, and the maximum flow is going to be 10 litres a second, that's not changed.
Protozoa is going to be in, and that is one of the standards.
You can't find it in the capital works budget.
It's coming. It is coming.
The document that was issued by the council on the 30th of June, just gone, it's not in the budget. it's just a chlorination thing. We've looked through the CapEx budget.
I think we can actually just check up on that, Claire, if you want to add that as an action, perhaps for the next one, we can have a look. And I could be mistaken, but I do recall lots of discussion about protozoa filters going in, and we brought them all together, and that we've gone right round the lake. So I'm also interested to know if there's protozoa filters in there, because I was of the understanding that they went into all of them. It was a requirement. It was an additional requirement under Local Waters Done Well to put those protozoa barriers in. So I thought there was something already there, and it was in a previous budget, so it may not show in a current budget, but let's follow up. Yeah.
We did see the chlorination into the 20,000 litre tanks in Tiverton Downs,
Yeah.
but we can't find...
Well, that's ongoing as well. The protozoa barrier is a one-off. We put it in. And chlorination carries on and on and on. So that's going to be in a budget line ongoing, but that might not be. So let's just check and see if it's actually gone in, and if not, when it's planned to. And yeah, I think that might answer your question there, and we can come back next time.
So just to bring this back to costs for River Road, and you mentioned the water, and it was a nice diversion, thank you. I'd like to see if you can get an East Taupo breakout. Can you do that? Do you get a breakout of your budget where inbound and outbound, do you run it like a business or no?
Cost centre.
Well, Waters
No.
is its own entity now as well. So Waters,
Water for a moment.
well, it's all run under the same umbrella. It's all run under.
It's out, is it in or it's out?
It is in-house, but a separate business unit, and it's for the entire district. So we don't have a breakdown of specifically East Rural, Taupō.
Well, you do for water, we just talked about that.
There's budget lines, but it's a general rate system. So general rates from the entire district are the budget line. It's not necessarily going to be presented to Kylie as the Taupō East Rural rep what the water costs are out here. It's all handled by the Water Services Delivery Committee under the new Local Waters Done Well.
Take a note.
Yep.
And go, it would be really good if you could break it out by what the representative is actually managing.
We're not
We don't manage it. That's the point. So the government has insisted. No, let me finish, because what the government has imposed on us is a completely separate business unit. So it is not in-house per se. It is over there, ring-fenced financing. How that is run is basically overseen by the Commerce Commission. So they will tell us if we're under-investing. They will tell us if we're over-investing. They'll tell us if we're charging too much or too little. We're not really running it in the sense that we would. We're quite heavily regulated by central government and the regulators. Taumata Arawai for compliance and the Commerce Commission for the economies.
May I ask, is it so it's a council-controlled organisation?
Essentially, yes.
It's a limited liability?
No, it's not a formal CCO. We didn't set up a CCO per se, but we did have to set up a separate business unit. Ultimately, we will probably have to amalgamate Waters in time. When we made the decision to keep Waters in-house, it was a bit like the amalgamation situation. Our infrastructure, and we were a long way ahead, was in quite good condition. We didn't need to amalgamate in order to meet the government's requirements. Waipa and a few others most certainly did. So Waikato Waters was formed. Our ratepayers were not better off under that model, so we said, hey, look, we appreciate what you're doing and we're going to do this, but can we have an agreement whereby we pay a certain membership and we have service and procurement shared services. So that keeps our costs down as well. We're reviewing the decision to keep a separate business unit, and I think it's 2 years. It may be that we have to join in at that point, because the infrastructure costs are exponential. It just keeps going up and up and up. Like the construction inflation, civil inflation has been double digits for quite a while now, and it's cumulative. So it's getting really, really costly. We can keep a really close eye on the district and the waters and where the charging is. We've got really high requirements for reporting to Taumata Arawai on our compliance, and then the Commerce Commission on how we're running the business unit.
And that alone has added the cost.
The cost
Nearly
is...
$500,000 a year. Just in compliance, $500,000.
At the moment, it's just a cost centre. It's not an actual standalone. You call it a business unit, but it's really just a cost centre, isn't it?
Outbound, not inbound.
It's still governed
There's still a governance structure. There is still a governance structure. It's just like the council, except just for waters. And we currently have an independent chair of that committee. Well, that's something that the government actually quite liked about our proposal when we said we wanted to keep it in-house, but we would have an independent chair overseeing the governance structure, because they wanted separation. They wanted full separation. We've got full financial separation of waters. You'll see that as a completely separate bill, essentially, eventually. So, it's all been done under government instruction, essentially.
Because what you might find is what's happened a lot overseas, where they've set up a thing, put it into a limited liability company, and then float it off.
100%. Look at what's happening in Auckland.
Don't want to waki wai here, we.
The hardest thing with this waters thing is that they've followed the Scottish model, and the Scottish model isn't working. So we followed a broken model, and I don't understand that. Our water situation was okay. The infrastructure was okay. We were doing okay, or probably better than okay, but again, central government looked at councils that hadn't been investing. They didn't want to be seen to put rates up, so they weren't investing in the infrastructure. Now the infrastructure's breaking down, so they decided to fix their problems by putting a blanket across all of the councils, much like this situation that we're currently sitting in here. So we didn't have a broken model, we didn't have a broken problem, but it got imposed on us.
And it was 3 waters to begin with, and the preparation for the handover cost millions. Nationally, we're talking billions. And then there's a change of government, and then it's stop what you're doing, forget all of that, we're starting again. And that's what's actually costing everybody money, is this constant flip-flopping every 3 years. So I know I'm flogging a dead horse potentially, but just let the government know what you're seeing, what you're feeling, because we're advocating as strongly as we can, but I think we need a bit of people power right now. And we do have a really good opportunity, because it's all very up in the air down there. And a lot of what's being imposed on us currently is will it even come to fruition? I don't know, but whoever the government is that's sworn in at the end of January, they need to know what the public think. They're going to know what we think, but they need to know what the public think as well.
The power of 13 elected representatives versus the power of 25,000 people writing an email. It's two quite different things.
I was really interested in the investment. You were holding it for me. I was about to attack you. See if I can. I'm really interested in the rates that we pay, which we track, and what percentage of that, not whether it's water or whether it's this, what percentage of that comes back into the development of your area. And yes, I'm aware we pay for the library in town and probably the hot pools and, who knows what other community services there are. But I actually think that it would be really, really positive feedback for the citizens that live out here, and it would true for lots of these smaller communities, just to have an understanding of what percentage of their rates comes back to them.
And I guess it's how you see what comes back to you. So,
well, you just incorporate everything.
Last year there was $1.9 million spent on that stretch of Broadlands Road with the upgrade. So there
took it off us so that you could run a $12 million event that closed the road down so that citizens couldn't move on the road that they invested in. Okay, that's probably enough for one day, I think.
But that's an example. So there could be the argument of people living urbanly in Taupo saying, why are we contributing $1.9 million to Broadlands Road when that provides access to River Road, Tiverton's Downs Road and Whites Road? So we can argue this both ways and sideways.
the Kinloch area is in the Taupo ward, and I have an affinity to that particular area, and they asked for the same information last traineum, and I did go back to our finance team for that, but because we work under a general rates model, it's so incredibly difficult to break it all down. So an example, I suppose, I mean, you think about the targeted rate system that it used to be. Turangi couldn't afford anything. They couldn't afford anything on their own, and it was the same for Kinloch. If we had to rely on targeted rates just for those areas, you'd really be much, much worse off. There's a good reason why we moved to general rates. But that does make it pretty difficult to then be able to pluck things out to be able to give you some figures like that. It is very difficult and time consuming. So I'm not sure if we'd be able to do that very accurately even.
And even using Broadlands Road as the example, I mean, it's now a de facto State Highway 5 for all the trucks moving from Hawke's Bay to the port of Tauranga.
And we are... But that is actually something that we've submitted to NZTA, is this is the situation that we now find on Broadlands Road. For these reasons, we would now like to see an increase in the subsidy that you provide to us for that area. So there are some districts that actually get 80% of their roading subsidised, because 80. 49. Neither here nor there, but if we could get an increase through the argument that we're putting to them, what difference could that make? So, but we have to go through the argument, we have to go through the statistics, which is what we're doing. Because the same thing happened when they shut State Highway 1 and they sent everybody through Tarahonga Road and then down Poihipi Road. People have now found that as their new wayfinding journey. So what used to be very quiet, very rural, very peaceful is now like a superhighway. So the same thing as when they shut 5 and poked everybody out this way, people have gone, oh, that's a new way to tiki tour along. I'm going to use that route now, which means that we've got... So we are trying to advocate and we are gathering the data and trying to push forward that we actually need more support because you created this issue for us, you know.
Cameras now. You've got the one right at the entrance to the road facing towards Reparoa, and then you've got the camera that picks it up at the other end near, I think it's Mitre 10, is that right?
Yeah, but yeah, with the shift after COVID, with the change in shipping schedules into the port of Napier, where big companies like Maersk and CGA, for example, we only go to Tauranga, the port of Tauranga. A lot of containers move from Hawke's Bay to Tauranga down Broadlands Road. And you're talking 50 max trucks, 58-tonne trucks. We hear them all night going up and down. So that was something that we put in our submission from River Road 2 years ago, was to look at this. So it's interesting and it's good to hear that there's work, because in the end, that $1.4 million, was it? 1.9, yeah. I mean, it doesn't cover very many metres.
No. If this road out here was classified as State Highway 5B,
yeah,
it would become LTSA's problem.
Yes, it would.
But that's not going to happen.
They're not going to take it anymore.
No.
Well, they won't shut down State Highway 5.
Yeah.
We'll block this off.
I can see it happening. Look, I think we're probably almost at time, so I just think there's a bit of a lull there. I would just like to genuinely say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for coming, thank you for being interested, thank you for your questions, thank you for your challenges. I do this because I care. This is home for me. This matters a lot. That is my motivation. But you can't have a conversation with yourself, and you actually need good challenge and good constructive criticism and comments. So thank you for taking the time, and thank you for being interested. Yeah, it's amazing to have people like you in communities. We get comments from around the country around the number of submissions and the number of community meetings that we hold. So the last lot around waters, we had over, I can't even remember how many thousand submissions. One council had 23 submissions. I mean, it brings tears to your eyes when you're thinking this has that much of an impact on a community. And like I've said to you guys, if you only want to put one sentence in your submission, one sentence is fine. It doesn't have to be a long and lengthy, but give us your views. And I love nothing more than reading through the submissions, and I find the people that I know that are submitting, and you're able to have a conversation with them. So, you know, I just want to say thank you for being you guys, and I think this is a little piece of heaven out here that you need to keep under wraps. And so, yeah, look, thank you. There's a cup of tea here, some chocolate biscuits. Stay and have a chat, or disappear home and get your fire going for potentially another -10, looking at what's happening out there. I'm pleased I was only at -5 this morning in the calf shed, so yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thank you.
We certainly do appreciate it, especially this time of the year.
I'm just thinking being front and centre, I think that's really appreciated. It takes a lot of energy to deal with all these resident groups. We recognise that.
I get energy from it.
I can
Really.
see that.
I enjoy it.
It comes
I
through
enjoy
very
it.
strongly.
I really genuinely care about the place I live in. I'm not as familiar with it here, which is why I've come out for a drive today, because I want to hear your views. It's very hard for me to make a decision because I am a district-wide councillor. I represent you as well.
Well, we'd take you down the boat ramp, but
Yeah,
there's no
well,
lighting.
Kylie was going to go that way.
There's
actually,
no
but
lighting
you
down
know
there,
that
unfortunately.
Yeah.
We need to do the walk and
Yeah.
see
We've
what
been
we're all
blocked
on
for
about.
lighting, so you can't go down there unless you want to break your ankle.
Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe not tonight, but another time.
Yeah.
My husband and I do travel around the district quite a bit, especially if something's topical. I like to lay eyes on it. So thank you for being so engaged.
Just don't go doing any wheelies down there, eh? It's not a good look.
Well, if I get stuck in my
Can't make any promises.
four-wheel drive, you'll come and save me, won't you?
But the other thing is, it's good that the four of us here, and Graham is an honorary member,
And Nikki?
and Nikki,
Nikki over
oh,
there.
of course, Nikki, yeah.
Yep.
You've got 5 of the 7 members of the River Road Community Collective here,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I
we
flew in
tend
for
to, because, you know, people are milking cows, driving log trucks, driving tractors. There's a lot of stuff goes on here
And we've
24
all
hours
got
a day.
families and,
Yeah.
you know, lives. And so, yeah, I
But
really
we-
appreciate you guys
We
coming.
tend to try and filter, grab and consolidate a little bit of the opinion and needs of the street and up and down the Broadland Strait.
And the good news is they love to share.
Yes. True.
So
Jen,
yeah, so I flew in for this because I think it's important too, and every community deserves attention. And this might be your community today, but who's to say where your journey will take you, right? So
I think that's true of us all.
the more we put in.
We might be part of Road Ruin.
Okay,
thank you.
You used
thank
to
you
be.
very much. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah.